Daniel Dennett, filósofo estadounidense. Es uno de los filósofos de la ciencia más destacados en el ámbito de las ciencias cognitivas, especialmente en el estudio de la inteligencia artificial y de la memética. También son importantes sus aportaciones acerca de la significación actual del darwinismo. Daniel Dennett, considerado por muchos el filósofo más influyente del mundo, aborda grandes temas como la naturaleza de la conciencia, el libre albedrío, la evolución y la religión. Daniel Dennett es autor de Breaking the Spell, Freedom Evolves y Darwin's Dangerous Idea, entre otros.
Bienvenidos a un programa especial de Dialogando con la Ciudad de las Ideas. Hoy una de las mentes más polémicas, más provocadoras, más talentosas, pero sin duda alguna más prestigiada en el mundo actual de la filosofía occidental, Daniel Dennett, una persona que se ha involucrado en entender la conciencia, pero con conocimientos del siglo XXI, entendiendo las grandes preguntas, aunque no siempre ofreciendo las grandes respuestas. Daniel Dennett nos va a provocar. Es una persona que se involucra con la religión, con Dios, con la libertad, con lo humano, con el aquí y el ahora, con la vida antes y después de la muerte. Daniel Dennett, en el Museo de Historia Natural, nos invita a no creernos todo lo que pensamos. Quédese con nosotros. Muchas gracias. Truly an honor to be with you.
I'm delighted to talk with you today.
Thank you very much to be in Idea City, our program.
Yes.
When I make the introduction about yourself, of course I mentioned that you were a kind of Renacentist, del Renacimiento, you know, because you're involved in everything, but in a very deeply way, which I do admire a lot. And the people that have read your books, of course, with most of us, I think, you make us always think, and not to believe everything we have been thinking about. Mm-hmm. Based on that, I would like to ask you, because there are so many topics to talk with you, I would like to play a game. It's not like the game that you talk in Darwin's Dangerous Idea, in this great book that we strongly recommend.
I think the game is in the other book.
It's in this one. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're right. En este libro, me equivoqué del libro, en las primeras páginas, el profesor Daniel Dennett hace un juego donde saca una persona de un grupo y le dicen que tiene que tratar de adivinar el sueño de un grupo de gente. Pero lo que no sabe la persona que sacan es que cada vez que él hace una pregunta que termina con una letra entre la A y la P, le van a contestar que sí, y entre la P y la Z que no. Pero hay una regla, there is a rule. Si hace una pregunta que termine con P y que se contradiga con otra que terminará con S, allí siempre la gente utiliza la congruencia. Well, this is a kind of game like that.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I will say a letter. I will start with the letter A. And I will keep telling myself the alphabet in Spanish. You tell me stop, and there will be a question.
Okay.
A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K. The letter is K. K. Let us say, if you could have 1 minute to tell us what do you think about ¿qué significa inteligencia kinética? Kinetic intelligence.
Kinetic intelligence. Oh, I see. It's got a K in it, yes. When people first tried to do artificial intelligence, they had the idea that what knowledge is a lot of facts, and all you have to do is make a program which has all the facts in it, and then it can be a theorem prover, and we could have what we might call the walking encyclopedia. This would be a robot which did everything by consulting this great list of facts and proving things about where to put the foot next and how to step and how far is it to the grocery store and so forth. It didn't take all that long for people to realize that this is just not the way to do business. That there's a sort of implicit, tacit intelligence that is bodily, that it takes advantage of the physics of the body, that uses time in very subtle ways. If you want to make a robot that can actually survive, it better have this kind of intelligence. This is a can-do. This is a behavioral intelligence rather than just a lot of facts.
Creo que sí hay un ser superior en el cual nos refugiamos la mayoría de personas cuando nos encontramos en situaciones difíciles.
Para mí Dios es básicamente, no sé, es ese como ente, esa energía que tiene que estar en tu vida presente.
Para mí significa todo, ya que con Dios todo y sin Dios nada.
Para mí realmente Dios está más allá de cualquier religión. Es algo superior, algo supremo, es el todo.
Well, following this game, I will just keep one because I really want to listen your opinion about God.
Okay.
Theism. Can we go directly to the G just for this occasion?
Sure.
Tell me.
Let's go.
What's your thesis about it? You know, we know that you say that you believe in the people that believes, in a way, but
I think that if we look at the history of religions, first of all, we see that religion has evolved more in the last 100 years than it did in the last 2,000 years. And I think ever since the 17th century, religion has had to adjust itself to be credible, and it has had to create new principles of faith and new ideas. And what we've seen is that the concept of God has undergone quite a change. And God has become less and less anthropomorphic, more and more just a non-human-like wonderfulness in the world. And sometimes some theologians make that very clear. And if you're someone like Paul Tillich, then God is just the ground of all being. I don't know, maybe if that's what God is, then maybe I believe in God because maybe that's quarks or maybe natural selection. Maybe that's what God is. So I think we see that in order to preserve itself, in order to keep going, in order to not to go extinct, religions have had to evolve farther and farther away from the original, from the God of the Old Testament, of the Torah, for instance. That's male, very human, many human emotions, anger, jealousy. It's a big guy in the sky. And we see fossil traces of that idea of God everywhere, in our humor, but also in our religious art, in our themes. But people have been moving away from that for a long time.
Just to finish with this brief segment, in your perspective, how do you explain the origin of everything?
I don't think I can explain the origin of everything. And I don't think religion can. And maybe science can make some real progress on this. I can imagine that cosmology will converge with some very clever experiments that we can't even conceive of now, and rule out some theories and make some more and more plausible. So we may learn more and more about the ultimate origins of the universe, or we may not. I don't think it does any good to just invent an explanation. I could do it.
It's really an honor to be with you, Professor Dennett. We will keep doing this. I will start now with the B, because the letter A was related with God, with atheism, agnosticism, etc. B. CLFGHJK. Okay. I will say the letter is H. Hallucinations, are they possible?
Hallucinations have fascinated me for years. And every now and then I would come across an account of a hallucination that I found just frankly incredible. I thought, this is too much. And I can't think, what is too much? And I think the answer to that comes from the sense that hallucination is possible only to the extent that the subject of the hallucination, the person who experiences the hallucination, has to be either extremely passive as an experiencer, or tricked into pursuing a particular experimental path. And the reason for this is very simple. Well, think about virtual reality, these helmets you wear. I just had one on the other day. It has two little cameras, and you put it on your head, and then you think you're in this sort of cartoony world. Of course, you know immediately that you're in a virtual world. You're not fooled. It doesn't seem to be the real world, because the texture, the resolution is too coarse. But moreover, it's not, you can't reach out and touch things, and you can't smell them, and if you go like this, they don't make a sound. All the information that we can take in is an incredibly rich stream of information, a bit stream, very broad band bit stream. If that had to be created falsely, it would just be computationally too expensive for the brain to do.
Okay, I will keep going. E.
Stop.
S. The word S. Here I have two questions. You can choose one of both with the S. Science. Could there be a science of memetics? I will explain later what memetics is. Or question two, and you choose, seeing is believing?
Yeah. Let's look at the science of memetics. There can be perfectly real phenomena that just do not lend themselves to experimental science very well. There isn't right now a science of clouds. There's meteorology, but clouds, individual clouds, they come and go. They're too amorphous. There's no cloudology. There's meteorology. That doesn't mean that there aren't clouds. Are there memes? Yes, of course there are. Memes are self-replicating cultural items. The best example of memes is just words. Think about, what is a word made of? What is it? I mean, is it a physical thing? Is it made of sound? Is it made of ink? It's
an idea, a concept.
It's an abstraction. It has physical properties in its instantiations, but a word is actually a data structure. It's made out of information. Do words exist? Of course. Can we have a science of words? Yeah, linguistics. We can have several sciences of linguistics. We can have historical, sort of evolutionary linguistics, and we can have computational linguistics and linguistics looking at how languages, how can I speak and how can you understand? Now, a science of memetics would do for all memes what linguistics does for words.
Here I have a question in terms of what in memes could mean evolution, could mean actual improvement, because one thing is that probably the fittest word or the fittest meme could survive against others because it's a much more efficient way to say something, but not because it's really a good idea. So how do you work with that?
The first principle that everybody needs to understand about memes is that whether or not they spread, whether they are fit, has nothing directly to do with whether they are true or whether they're good for us at all. In this, they're like
genes.
They're like viruses. They survive because they can. However, over the centuries, we have created some selective environments in culture which are pretty severe and are designed to favor the spread and propagation of memes that are good for us. One of them is just markets, economies. People won't pay for the replication of second-rate technology. That's why technology tends to improve over time. Nobody will pay for the bad stuff.
Your meaning of morality.
Bueno, mira, la moral es aquello que nos indica mentalmente qué es lo que tenemos que hacer, lo bueno y lo malo.
Son tabús, son frenos que pone la sociedad para regularse ella misma.
Pues bueno, básicamente la moral es como que tu guía de vida, es como yo lo veo.
Son los principios de la familia, lo que se le transmite de padres a hijos, de generación en generación.
I just have been talking with Jonathan Haidt, who describes liberal morality and conservative morality. And liberal morality places the emphasis on freedom and not hurting others, avoiding suffering, and otherwise as much freedom as possible, and doesn't put a big premium on respect for authority or purity or loyalty. These are not as big for liberals. Very interesting research that he's doing. I think that using research like that and appreciating where other people are coming from, we can imagine in some detail a process of mutual education where we sit down and everything is on the table. Nobody gets to say, oh, sorry, my holy book says this is forbidden and it's not up for discussion. No, everything is up for discussion. If your God tells you you mustn't do this, then your obligation is to explain it to the rest of us and persuade us. That's your obligation. That's the way to be faithful to your religion, for instance. I think a process, a political process, can actually settle, can converge, and there's plenty to start with. The golden rule, basic ideas about suffering and not causing suffering and maximizing freedom, respect for each other, and so forth. And this would be, notice, an entirely human-made morality. It's not God tells us, it's we tell each other. It is bottom-up morality. And I think the process that I've just described is simply an idealization of what we've been doing for 2,000 years anyway. The morality of today is not the morality of 2,000 years ago.
What do you think in terms of justice, for example, the perspective of John Rawls of the veil of ignorance? It's a good standard?
Well, I think John Rawls created almost single-handedly a wonderful revolution in philosophy. At the time that he wrote The Theory of Justice, philosophers, at least in the English-speaking world, but I think as well pretty much around the world, had a sort of failure of nerve. They weren't trying to do big projects. The idea that somebody would try to do, theory of justice, it was too big, too ambitious. And he did such a wonderful job. Even though it's not perfect, he rekindled the ambition of philosophers to tackle really big problems with really big theories. Absolutely. And he did it so well that people had to take it seriously. People who weren't philosophers, people in the law, people in economics, people in political science, people in psychology. And that was great. That's why he was one of the great, great philosophers of the 20th century. The veil of ignorance is a brilliant idea, and what fascinates me is that although John Rawls is the first one to articulate it among human beings, it is already implemented in a way in sexual reproduction. When your sex cells divide by meiosis, there is a veil of ignorance, and you don't know which of two copies is going to be, is it the maternal copy or the paternal copy that is going to go on? And it turns out to be very important that there is a sort of Darwinian veil of ignorance in the very organization of multicellular life, and for a very similar reason.
Darwin's, what's the dangerous idea of Darwin?
Well, it's the idea of natural selection itself, and the question is, why is it dangerous?
Exactly.
Would it be dangerous for the people of the United Kingdom to start driving on the right tomorrow? Manifestly,
I think so.
It would be very dangerous. There would be lots of accidents. But, you know, the people of Sweden switched from driving to the left to driving on the right, and they did it over a single weekend.
Really? Wow.
And this was back in the early 60s, and almost no accidents. It was beautifully done because everything was prepared in advance, and everybody went together. And it all happened at once, and there were no holdouts. Where the problems come is when people want to create exempt zones where we're going to be pre-Darwinian in our thinking. And then they fight these terrible battles. And whether it's intelligent design, which is right about biology, or it's just the tremendous antipathy to evolutionary thinking in the social sciences, in the humanities, in literature departments, in the arts.
You actually wrote a book also about this topic, the mind. I know you can tell us many things about the mind, but what have been actually your contribution to science and philosophy in this particular topic?
Well, I think I've made two contributions. One was spelling out the idea of the intentional stance, which is simply the practice that we all engage in all the time of treating things as agents, not just each other, but animals, even plants, sometimes inanimate objects, sometimes if they're very clever. And doing this, we treat them as an agent, we give them beliefs and desires, and then we figure out what they're going to do. And I articulated the sort of rules of the strategy, the way in which it depends on attributing rationality to the agent, and pointed out that there was a sort of gradation from the simplest intentional systems, like a thermostat.
The other contribution?
The other one is, I think, my theory of consciousness. In particular, says we have to get away from a very, very compelling idea, the idea that there's a place in the brain where it all comes together, where the show happens. I call that place the Cartesian theater. And because Descartes, he was, of course, a dualist, and he said that everything has to funnel through the pineal gland, and then there's a little miracle happens, and then you're conscious of it. We know there's no dualistic miracle, but so then people say, well, everything has to come to some place in the brain where the consciousness happens. This is already, I think, a deep mistake. We have to understand how consciousness can be distributed in the brain in both space and time.
It's an honor to be with you. I have learned so much.
It's
the people in our country, in Latin America, appreciate a lot of gratitude from Proyecto 40, from Poder Cívico. So thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Y gracias a ustedes, porque gracias a ustedes y para ustedes, Poder Cívico tiene la iniciativa de la Ciudad de las Ideas. Hoy, el doctor Daniel Dennett. Pues, ¿qué les pareció este programa? Les quiero compartir que me fue un poco complejo entrevistar a una mente tan renacentista y tan diversa que ha escrito de tantos temas. Y para tratar de capturar su esencia fue por ello que se nos ocurrió de manera lúdica preguntarle lo primero que le venga a la mente sobre diferentes tópicos. Daniel Dennett va a estar en el Festival de la Ciudad de las Ideas en Puebla del 6 al 8 de noviembre. Un festival de mentes provocadoras que ustedes pueden adquirir mayor información al respecto al www.ciudadelasideas.com, donde todos los jóvenes que quieran asistir podrán enviar un ensayo en el cual nos compartan cuáles son las 3 ideas que ustedes creen que hayan transformado a la humanidad de mayor relevancia. Todas las bases de los datos para dicho concurso se encuentra, repito, en www.ciudadelasideas.com. Espero les haya provocado Daniel Dennett, que busquen sus libros en las librerías Sanborns y agradecerle a todos nuestros patrocinadores por ser empresas socialmente responsables que apuestan en ideas para transformar al mundo. Muchas gracias.
La Ciudad de las Ideas, un festival sin precedentes, agradece el apoyo a las siguientes empresas socialmente responsables.